Good afternoon and welcome. This is Shannon Polly, and I'm thrilled to be part of the MAPP Thrive Summit. Strategies to Thrive. I was talking to a colleague the other day and she said, I'm so excited. I saw all these lists of things and I couldn't believe that all of these are, free. And I sent them to all my friends. So I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for being here. I am here in Washington, D.C., and I have gotten my children off to do their schooling, which is amazing. It's an appreciative process to look at what teachers do on a daily basis. So I hope all of you are doing well. Glasgow, Scotland! Oh my goodness, that's fantastic. Okay, I'm sorry, terrible Scottish accent. But thank you for being here. So thriving through change, how can appreciative inquiry help you thrive during a pandemic? I wanted to start with a quote, and I'll give you a second to read it. It feels like nowadays, there's a crack in everything, and things are incredibly challenging. Some might even call them broken at the time being. And those of us in positive psychology are approaching it, day by day, sometimes with survival and sometimes with, trying to think about what good can come of it. So I wanted to start with a story. And this story is about how to thrive during a really difficult time. This is about Jerry Sternin, who in 1990 was with Save the Children, and he shipped his entire family to Vietnam. Now, with Save the Children, he was supposed to address the issue of malnutrition. Now, if you ask anyone at that time, there were three factors that were the issues of malnutrition. Sanitation was terrible. There was abject poverty, and there was no clean water. Those are pretty overwhelming things to try to address. He got to the airport, and the official who met his family said, we don't really want you here. We're not sure who approved you being here. We don't have any funding for you, and we're giving you 6 months. So if you can achieve some change in 6 months, great. If not, you'll be going home. More challenges faced Jerry Sternin. But what was interesting is that what he did is he didn't do what people normally do, which is to look for the problems and how to fix them. Instead, what he did is he gathered all the parents and he had them weigh all of these adorable children. He had them weigh and measure them. And then he had them look at the data and said, are there any children that are heavier, that are well nourished? And the women scanned the data and they said, yes. And he said, you mean it's possible in this village for children to actually be well nourished? And they looked at the data and said, yes. And he said, let's go see what they're doing. And what he discovered was something he never could have found out when he was in the US. It was that, the normal meals that children had were twice a day. They had 2 bowls of rice. But the well-nourished children, their mothers did something different. They gave them 4 meals a day, so they split it up, and the malnourished stomachs couldn't actually digest all that food. But they also incorporated sweet potato greens, which were considered low-class food, and little tiny shrimp from the rice fields. And what they instinctively did without knowing it was adding those nutrients that the children needed. So when he found this out, he met with the mothers and he had them bring their children and he had them teach the other villages and them teach the people in their village and other villages about, the food. And he had them bring their children, bring food, bring sweet potato greens, bring shrimp. And within 6 months, 85% of those children were better nourished. Within 2 years, 2.2 million Vietnamese children were better nourished because the villagers taught each other. It's an amazing story. And it highlights something that people usually don't do, which is when things are especially bad, look for what's working. And some might say that being in the middle of a global pandemic and being locked in your home might be especially bad. Sometimes I think, you know, when the teacher sends home dead bees for me to have my children pollinate a plant, I think you're kidding me. But you have to look for what's working. So what I want to share a bit with you today is this approach of how you can look at what's working, some of the science behind it. What is appreciative inquiry? Are we being crazy to even talk about focusing on the positive in the middle of a pandemic? And then I want to give you some actual tools that you can use with your clients, with your family, colleagues, your teams, and it comes straight from the horse's mouth, David Cooperrider, who's the founder of Appreciative Inquiry. So the principle of appreciative inquiry is to focus on strengths. And as we know from the data from the Gallup organization, been studying it for 40 years, strengths buffer change. So I have a challenge for you. If you're checking your email, if you're doing something else, I want you to focus for a moment. So on the next slide, I'm going to show a picture, and I'm only going to show it for like 15 seconds. And I want you to count the number of people that you see, okay? And then once, like I said, I'm only gonna show it for 15 seconds, and then I'm gonna have you type it in the chat panel. On the next slide, here we go. Okay, I want you to type in the chat panel how many people you saw, then what was hanging from the tall building on the left, and then 22, 27, 28, 22 if kids count. Okay. Sure, kids count. All right, what was hanging from the tall building on the left? I'm not seeing any. I couldn't hold my fingers up fast enough. Okay. Elaine says, haha, no clue. What was the small child wearing? No? Nobody? Red? Maybe red. Which one? Clothes. Yeah, well done, Michelle. Yes, the small child was wearing clothes. Was busy counting the people and got that wrong, apparently. Well, how come you didn't get it? You didn't get it wrong. You just weren't looking for that because I didn't tell you to. I'm gonna go back though, because I actually don't know how many people are in the painting. I've done this a lot of times. I've never stopped to count. It is a red flag, and the small child was wearing red and gray and a little bit of white on the bottom left. So you didn't see it because you weren't looking for it. So the thing is, we see what we are looking for, and we can choose what we focus on. So if I want to focus on the fact that my children's teachers are sending me dead bees, I'm totally overwhelmed. I can definitely focus on that. Or I can focus on the fact that, you know, my kids are learning to roller skate outside, and it's really fun to watch them. And I actually feel like, you know, this thing that I've been doing in the world for over a decade now has real traction, and I'm helping people. So you see what you're looking for. Now we know this from strengths. I love it. Larissa says, I'm supposed to be building an astronaut obstacle course right now. This is the thing. It does. I start to say we. I'm like, we need to finish our work. I'm like, no, it's not we. It's her and her. I have two. So good luck with the astronaut obstacle. Maybe there'll be a silver lining there too. So strengths have been your greatest source of learning, success at work. They improve your performance when you focus on what you're good at. And Piper Lynn is my trusty assistant. She's gonna type in the chat panel via character.org, which is a free character strength survey if you haven't seen it, where you can get your top 24 strengths. But this last icon I wanna share, which is it helps you feel optimistic, courageous, and resilient in the face of obstacles. And I don't know about you, but for the last 6 or 7 weeks, I've felt a lot of obstacles and obstacles in the future. I'm praying for summer camp, although I don't know if I'm gonna get that hope. So that survey right there can tell you what your top 24 character strengths are. It's been validated across all cultures. It's available in 26 languages. Someone correct me who's online if there are more languages than that. So that's a way to reorient yourself to the positive. What can I leverage? I've been leveraging humor. I've been watching a lot of comedy at night when I have time. I've been leveraging perseverance and kindness, trying to. Now, I had the honor of getting to be part of the US Army resilience training team. And as an offshoot of that, a colleague of mine and I did a workshop for some homeless veterans in Philadelphia, where the course is at University of Pennsylvania. And I'll never forget this moment when we're facilitating this course, we're talking about strengths, and there was a guy in the front row who was, you know, hadn't had money for dental work in years, had missing some teeth. And, you know, he tells a story of his strengths. And I said, oh, well, I hear this strength and this strength and this strength. And he looks at me and he says, I have all those strengths? And my heart almost broke in that moment, thinking like, when you're told what's wrong with you all the time, you almost don't even see it. You don't even see it. So part of it is you have to be reminded to look for it, because our brains are hardwired to look for what's not working. I want to give a high level on what appreciative inquiry is, if you haven't heard of it before. It has the unfortunate acronym of AI, which is also artificial intelligence. So in the tech community, I have to clarify that. But appreciative inquiry, if you look at the definition, it's you appreciate, you recognize something, you're aware of it, but also appreciate means to raise in value. And inquiry is about questions. It's about the questions we ask. And as an executive coach, a leadership coach, I know from my work that the moment you ask a question, the mood shifts. You know, if I sidled up to you at a bar and I said, so what's wrong with you? Well, you know, it might be like, well, that's kind of rude, but actually it's, you know, my uncle's fault. That's how I got my, you know, my gout and the alcoholism, whatever. But if I sidled up to you in a bar and I said, what's right with you? When are you at your best? Well, you might feel like that's bragging, but it would shift the conversation the moment the question is asked. And that's one of the principles of appreciative inquiry. It looked at change management models, which most of them are deficit-based. And there's, you know, it's a millions of dollar industry of like, what's the problem? Let's do a root cause analysis. Let's come up with solutions. And what's our treatment plan? Hey, you know, how are we gonna fix it? But this is a strengths-led change, which totally flips it on its head. It's a paradigm shift of saying, what's already working? In every system, even the most dysfunctional system, something is working. And based on what's working, what would you like to see in the future? What do you want to see? Design thinking. Tech folks love to, you know, get their rapid prototyping on in this phase. And then the final phase is making it happen, brass tacks. So it's discover, dream, design, delivery, the 4D process. And I've been fortunate enough to get to do this with a ton of organizations. And it takes some visionary thinking to go from a problem metaphor, this machine industrial metaphor that, you know, were problems to be solved, to this mystery metaphor, that we're just webs of infinite strengths. And it really comes from a paradigm shift. So if you're thinking about a challenge, you can't solve that challenge from the way you thought about it before. You have to see the world in a completely new way. It's been done all over the world with Kofi Annan on the World Business Leaders Summit. The little green and blue circle in the middle, I got to be part of one for the entire city of Cleveland. And Cleveland, does anybody, Midwestern people, this is my chat panel question. What was Cleveland known as? What was its sort of catchphrase? You guys are all on the coasts, or you're in Scotland, so you might not know this. I am from Kansas originally, so. Cleveland used to be known as the mistake on the lake. because there was so much sewage in the Cuyahoga River that it caught on fire. So they wanted to shift that. And the title for their summit, which they did one every year for 10 years from 2009 to 2019, was Driving an Economic Engine to Create a Green City on a Blue Lake. So that is totally flipping the script. Now, Appreciative Inquiry, Peter Drucker and Marty Seligman, who's the founder of positive psychology, Marcus Buckingham, New York Times, winning author, has said these three things are the start of the strengths revolution in business. The task of leadership is to create an alignment of strengths that make a system's weaknesses irrelevant. So whether your leadership is your family and you're trying to design an entire astronaut obstacle course, or whether you are leading a virtual team of 100 people, how can you leverage those strengths that make your system's weaknesses irrelevant, especially in a time when we're seeing a lot of challenges? Now, I think it's a good question to say, like, is this totally Pollyanna that we're focusing on positivity in the middle of a pandemic? And I love this graphic, which David Cooperrider actually released yesterday in a blog article about this pyramid, the 3 levels of appreciative inquiry. So the bottom one is the easy one. It's easy to look at that Jerry Sternin, story and say, oh my gosh, well, that's extraordinary. He was able to cure poverty for 2.2 million people. It's easy to look and appreciate the strengths there. Using appreciative inquiry for the ordinary, I mean, you think about artists who can take, a vase and make that extraordinary. So, and I think, relationships, it's been proven that if you can find the unique, the precious, and the ordinary, that's what keeps things alive. But perhaps, just perhaps, appreciative inquiry in the tragic actually is where you can have the biggest impact. Maybe the most challenging, but the biggest impact. So the difference is that it isn't about positive or negative. It's not about that polarity. It's actually about what gives life to a system. What gives life to a system? And if you think about someone who's been through tragedy, Viktor Frankl, who wrote his book in 9 days after leaving his 3rd concentration camp in World War II, said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. And he writes about the kindnesses he saw in the concentration camps. He writes about those amazing things that he saw people doing to help each other survive. What is to give light must endure burning, he says in his book. So perhaps that's where we let the cracks let the light in. And yes, I definitely can share the blog post. Sohini, I'm going to share that link with you. Piperlyn, if you can put my email address in the chat panel, I'll also have it on the slide at the end, but I will make sure if for some reason you don't get that link, I will send it to you. The other reason why I think that this is a great and appropriate time for appreciative inquiry is, when we taught the soldiers, they'd all heard of PTSD. They all knew what it was. It's a very real thing. I have family members who suffered with it. It's not to disparage that at all. But how many of you, non-MAPsters on the call, MAPP graduates is what we call them, positive psychology graduates, how many of you heard of post-traumatic growth? Yes, Melissa has. All right, post-traumatic growth. So what was fascinating was when we told the soldiers about post-traumatic growth, that the soldiers who came back from World War II were actually stronger, were more resilient. The research they did on 9/11, that people whose strengths they tested before 9/11 were stronger after 9/11, there you could see the lights go off in their eyes. Things totally shifted. And these are some of the 5 things that shift with post-traumatic growth. Appreciation, relationships, absolutely. New possibilities, you tap into your own strength, and connection to spiritual change, however you define that. So those 5 things are the factors that the research says are connected to post-traumatic growth. So when you start with an actual summit, you have to look at what the topic is, and you start with that discovery, as I said before, the what gives life. You go to the dream, visioning the future. Usually I'm taking a room full of 100 people through this process. Then David Cooperrider, I love that he calls the first half of appreciative inquiry the ecstasy, and the second half is the laundry. The ecstasy and the laundry. So the first half is great, we're visioning, we're having fun, we're visioning the future, and then it's design, how are we gonna do this, and delivery, how are we gonna make it happen? And you have to focus on an appreciative topic. And the story I love the most is British Airways was asked to come up with a topic, and their first topic was reducing excessive bag loss. So it's okay to lose the bags, but not so many of the bags. They were like, no, that's not our appreciative topic, go away, come back. And they came back with outstanding arrival experience. So you have to have a topic that's slightly bigger than the group and a level up. And those are the 4 steps that you take an organization through. But really you can use these principles with individuals, which is why I wanted to talk about it today. So these are some of the questions that on the left that we go to instinctively, like what's the problem? What's wrong with you? Why do we blow it? What keeps you up at night? But the questions on the right are a reframing. What are you going to be most proud of? And the question in the middle, David's question, is one of my favorites, which is, what is the smallest change that could make the biggest impact? So I want to give you a chance to do some how-to. And the way it's going to work, I'm going to give you some principles for like an appreciative inquiry summit, what you do, but then I want to take you to this Google Doc that actually David Cooperrider is sharing that has an entire, it's a participant guide with questions. He's very generous. It's all open source, but I'm going to take you through this first. So think about strengths. If you can focus 80-20 on the strengths, 80% on strengths, 20% on weaknesses, that would be a good focus. Pre-frame your task, right? It has to be slightly larger than the system that you're part of. It can't just be, how can we get our work done faster? It has to be aspirational. The more people you have as part of this, looking for the good, the true, the possible, that makes it more successful if you're doing a summit. You want to see where innovation can come from anywhere. I was part of a summit with that I helped facilitate with Westin Hotels, and there was actually a part-time worker sitting next to the hotel manager, and the part-time worker came up with this idea, and he was like, what would be really great? This is about 10 years ago. It'd be great if we could have keyless locks and people could just open their hotel rooms with their phones. And people were like, oh, that's crazy. We don't have the money for that. And then of course, that's what we're doing now. So innovation can come from anywhere, whether you're the part-time worker or you're the manager. And then figure out how you can affect those strengths and leverage it across the system. Okay, so this is what I want you to do. I'm going to give you a link to this Google Doc that David Cooperrider has shared with everyone. And I'm going to hope that this is in my cut and paste. There we go. So you're probably going to have to cut and paste that. I want you to go to that Google Doc right now. If your last name starts with A through J, I want you to think about question 1. And if you're willing to post an answer in the chat panel, please do. If your last name is K through Z, please look at question 2 on that document. The question 2 of the first section. If you know David Cooperrider, he has lots of questions and lots of numbers. Just the very first question about meaning making. And if your last name starts with R through Z, I want you to go to question number 3. And if you have, you're not seeing the link. Okay, if you go to the chat panel, Piper Lynn, I've typed it in, Oriana. If you click on Zoom, there's a little thing at the bottom that has a Zoom webinar chat. And can anybody else explain this better than me? Piper Lynn doesn't see it either. Okay. Huh. All right. well, then I am going to do this. I'm going to, not seeing it in the chat, I'm trying to do it to all panelists. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna do this. I'm going to stop my share. I'm gonna escape, and I'm gonna go to this here so you can see it. Thank you for telling me you couldn't see it. All right, this is the link to the document. I'm gonna share again now. I did it to, oh, all attendees, not just panelists. Haha, thank you, that's my problem. See, I appreciate it. There we go. Now you see the link. You see the link? But I'm also gonna share my screen. Yes, okay, great. So go to that document and then you will have the document that I was talking about. Sorry about that, a little error. I thought I was getting everybody. Okay, now you have the document. But while you are looking at that, I am going to read the question, because this is also just for a little how-to if you're facilitating AI for a group. A best practice, which I didn't do for a number of years and I realized my mistake too late, is to read them out loud. So groups, the first groups will be question A, B, and C for question A, B, and C for question 1. Organizations everywhere have entered a new reality that few of us would have imagined at the start of 2020. In the span of several months, the COVID-19 pandemic has irrevocably transformed economies and organizations around the world, infected millions, and will tragically result in unpredictable numbers of deaths. And yet, moments like this do perhaps offer the opportunity for shifts, big and small. But openings do not last forever. And one way to keep such openings vital and expansive is to magnify meaningful stories through conversations with others. So if you're A through J, you're answering question A, which is this. In terms of what you're experiencing in these days and recent weeks, what is the most important thing stirring in you right now? How do you sense it relates to our future, your most important hopes, or a broader sense of purpose? If your last name is K through Q, your question is this. All around the world, we're seeing people on the front lines of care in hospitals, in our communities, and in our businesses. Everywhere we look, we see individuals responding in courageous, caring, and even unexpected ways. If you could put the spotlight on just 2 of the most powerful stories you've seen or heard, one in society, outside, say, your organization, your family, and one inside, what would they be? Consider examples that provide you with an image, inspiration, or new understanding of what we as human beings are capable of together. What 2 stories or examples, again, one outside our organization and one inside, would you like to put a spotlight on? And part C, if your last name is R through Z. Now, in your view, at the highest level of our country and our world overall, what possible good can come from this crisis, this tragedy, this moment of response? So I invite you, and actually we have enough, you know, a small enough group of people, because most people are going to listen to the recording, that I can take you off mute. So you can answer in the chat, Ruben, or I'd be happy to take you off mute and get an answer there. Okay? I'm going to unmute you, Ruben. You want to chat? There you are.
Sure. There we go.
Okay.
So there was a time where it was my first day on the job, and I used to be an IT manager at the time for an e-commerce company. And my actually second day on the job, the email server goes down, and we just had everybody kind of going crazy because everyone's trying to get everything up, including the manager at the time. So because I was new and I was still trying to get familiarized with the system, I just kind of took a step back and just started helping with the organization of folks rather than having some people work on the same thing. Just kind of had these different tasks for different people, and then organize some time where we can just kind of step back and regroup and share what we've learned or what kind of progress that we're making. And that it ended up helping resolve the problem sooner because, you know, everyone was trying to fix the same problem without talking to each other. And we yeah, we ended up getting the email server back up. So we're talking about over 600 employees at the time that had their email restored within a matter of hours instead of a couple of days.
Wow, that's a great story. What I want to ask Ruben or anybody else on the line to either post in the chat, what strengths do you think you heard from that story? I'm gonna have to have Piper Lynn help me. Oh wait, there's we go. There's the chat. Leadership, teamwork, absolutely, tomorrow. That's a great example. Calm, concern, leadership. I love that I mean, when a server's down, tech people know that all hands are on deck. And I love Elaine's comment, the World Central Kitchen, Jose Andres's work, feeding people everywhere in need. And personally, the Love and Care My Mom's Memory Care Center. Those people are gifts from heaven at those places. Other strengths were agility, urgency with calm. I like that combination. Yeah, so one of the things you want to do with these questions is pull out what the strengths are and get at those stories. I want to see if there's anybody else who wants to share a story, either voice or in the chat panel. I know that I'm tasked with pausing at 30 minutes so people who have to go can hop off, and then I take questions and then we wrap up. I'm gonna read something from Michelle. The need to keep learning to bend like palm trees. Things everywhere are going to change and everyone will need to bend and adapt. My hope is all will learn to remain focused and flex. That's really beautiful. That's really beautifully written. Number C, a more human world with greater empathy, kindness, and compassion. Profound positive change in our way of living and working that will impact our relationships. Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. And thank you, Oriana. You know, Oriana, that reminds me of one of the posts that I saw from Brene Brown on Instagram recently. And her post said something like, you know, why would we want the world to go back the way it was before? It was unfair and unequal, and there were lots of problems with it. Let's make it become better than it was. Yes. So this is just a taste of appreciative inquiry. I was so floored that David Cooperrider was so generous in sharing this as a tool. And so I wanted to share that with all of you. It is totally open space, and that's why we get to share. And I feel like it means that it elevates everybody. Everybody gets better at it. So it is the 30-minute mark. If you have to pop off, please feel free. But I wanted to be here for questions, and then I have a little, you know, I teach presentation skills, so I can't just like trickle off. I gotta have like an ending, real ending. But I wanted to get some questions from you about appreciative inquiry. So think about questions you have for me, and I'm gonna share a few more things so you have some time to write in the chat panel. What I want you to walk away with from the webinar today is when things are especially bad, you want to look for what's working. This is counterintuitive. So, you know, Chip and Dan Heath in their book, Switch, talk about, you know, when things are broken, our brain goes to what's wrong and how to fix it. But inevitably, you know, if we look at our report card for our marriages or our, you know, families or our businesses, we're going to see some C's and D's and F's. And we have to look at those places in our report card that are the precious A's that give us that energy. So you want to look at what's working and how can you do more of it? What's working and how can you do more of it? All right, so I'm going to go to some of the questions. And if you don't have a question, I'd love for you to type in the chat panel what an insight was that you're walking away with, and what's one thing you might try when you go home. Go home. You're already at home when you click off to do whatever you're going to do. How is it best to get others to change business models moving forward? Well, you gave me a really easy question, Michelle. Thank you so much. I'm scared people will be stuck in a pinwheel. This has worked before and it will work again. This is true. So I think that what you're getting at, Michelle, is, you know, when we feel afraid, we tend to clamp down and do what we've always done before. That's been proven that, you know, you actually see less when you're induced with negative emotion. And Barbara Fredrickson, who wrote Love 2.0 and Positivity, she talks about how when you induce positive emotion, it actually makes people feel more expansive, more connected, less racially biased. So what I would say is, if there's a way to induce positive emotion in a small or a big way, you know, on your team, maybe it's starting with wins, starting with a funny video. If it's about influencing others to like leadership to change an entire business model, I would talk with ethos, logos, and pathos, which is the Aristotle approach. So you have your, you know, the logic of it, you know, your credibility, but then there's the emotion of it. So when you share stories or examples like, you know, from Vietnam, those inspire us. They inspire us with awe, which induces positive emotion, but also gives us the capacity to think, wow, this is really, that maybe this is possible. And Michelle, I think in the article that I'm going to send you guys that, and this is my link, I'll send the email you have in the chat panel, but it actually gives some examples of business examples that really, it's in times of crisis that businesses change and mold and adapt. Okay, insight, the power of story. That's very kind, Elaine. I'll slip you $20 later. And the reminder about asking appreciative questions. Take away looking at what you're doing well instead of what you're not doing well to affects your happiness level. Absolutely. There are times where I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't get my kid to do her homework and I'm prepping for this webinar on the morning of the webinar and they're yelling outside the door. But I'm here, you know, we're all doing the best we can. Sometimes it's laughing. Sometimes it's self-compassion. So that's one of my favorite websites, which has led me through, helped me during this time of craziness. Post-traumatic growth shifts. I use AI in my work and sometimes struggle how to convey how it can be useful in bad times. Great. There seems to be a willingness and interest in changing how we approach work and our lives because of the time to have more expansive thinking. How to help prevent people from reverting back to their former way of approaching work. It's the question. That's fine. It can be a question and not an insight. Yeah, how to have more expansive thinking. So I think sometimes it's meeting people where they are and seeing sometimes when there is total overwhelm, it is like yesterday I was talking with this woman who, you know, I had signed up to be on a vegan research study right before this started. And I just was like, you know, I'm running my business. I'm, you know, managing kids. I can't be like worrying about everything being vegan and low fat for the next 12 weeks. And she was like, but can't you see how this could be a possible way to transform your life? And I was like, yeah, I know, I teach that stuff. It's not going to happen. So I was totally being, you know, not growth mindset, fixed mindset. And I was like, I don't have the capacity for that now. So I think it's being patient with yourself and with other people, seeing when there's an opportunity. And if you can induce positive emotion, and if there's a moment to step in when there's a window of hope, to try to do it then. I was talking to a colleague of mine, and she said that she has, you know, was talking to appreciative inquiry practitioners, and there was one day where they met and they were like, I'm not feeling hope right now. So that's fine too. You know, there are days, but I'm happy to answer any follow-up questions at the end of the webinar. I spent a total of 8.5 years in the Army and as a defense contractor, and I have those militaristic tendencies that don't work well in the civilian sector. Directness, it's true. Workshops like these help me to adapt to today's workforce. Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad, and thank you for your service. I feel cheesy when I say it, but I really, truly mean it. Thank you. Make sure people are paying attention. I do try to make people pay attention. Thank you so much for participating today. I want to see if this video is going to play. It actually was a suggestion by David Cooperrider as a way to end a session of Appreciative Inquiry. So I want to give you this link as well. I'll send you the link to the YouTube. And he has a follow-up question. So we'll see if this technology plays. If not, I'm going to roll with it. So let's see if this will play. Oh.
You with a set eyes, don't be discouraged, or I realize it's hard to take courage in a world full of people. You can lose sight of it all. The darkness inside you can make you feel so small. I see your true colors shining through. I see your true colors, and that's why I love you. So don't be afraid to let them show your true colors. True colors are beautiful, all like a rainbow. Show me your smile. Don't be unhappy, can't remember when. And I saw you laughing. This world makes you crazy, and you take it all you can.
All right, I'm going to pause it there just because I love music, but I don't play the whole thing. So what he suggests doing is to show that video and ask this question. As I depart from our meeting today, one of the true colors of our organization or community that I'm most proud of is, and an adjective that best describes my feelings as we now look ahead to the future is blank. So I invite you, if you'd like, in the chat panel to write the true colors you notice of your whatever organization you're part of, your family, your community that you're most proud of, and or an adjective that describes how you're feeling as you move ahead into the future. So this is a way to wrap up. And the research on positive emotion shows that you're actually less likely to be infected by a coronavirus if you induce more positive emotion. So whether it's funny cat videos or songs, whatever that is for you, make sure you have a high dose of positive emotion. So thank you so much for being here this afternoon with me, and collectiveness and optimistic, striving to do the right thing. I love it. Selflessness and feeling hopeful. Oh, me too. Sometimes it's, sometimes when I look back into this data, I'm like, oh, that's right. This stuff really works. Proud of my community's positive self-determination and hope. Hope for hugs. Elaine, my daughter, says she wants to have a hug party when all of this is over. So you will definitely be invited. All of you are invited. Cautious optimism. I think that's absolutely true, Ariana. There's also a link to an article that I'll send you if you email me at this link below. And it's a great article about tragic optimism, that, you know, right now it's okay to feel that there are challenges ahead. Love, feeling love, grow focused community, and like Oriana, realistic optimism. I like that as a phrase too. All right, Sahini, thank you so much. Thank you all for being here, and I wish you all the best. Please reach out if you have any questions or if I can be of help in any way. Take care. Have a great day.